Hello and welcome to a new episode of 24 Panels Per Second, the comic book movie and TV podcast from the Comic Crush. We're live on YouTube now and you can catch us just 24 hours later on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google and anywhere you get your podcasts. So hello to everyone listening in on the audio only stuff. We really appreciate you kind of dropping by. Remember that you can support the Comic Crush and help us make more shows and articles and essays by purchasing comics from our webshop or subscribing to our Patreon, where for less than the price of a single cup of coffee, you can get bonus episodes, exclusive comic recommendations, and quarterly comics mailed right to your door. If you check the webshop now, though, on Monday the 8th, so we're going out on Monday the 8th right now, check the web shop now and you can order any comic or comic set for $7.99 or over and get a 15% discount when you use the code BATBANK15 at checkout. This offer closes tonight, Monday the 8th of May at midnight. So get in there fast. Get in there and use that. Some great comics and comic sets on there. So in today's episode, we are going to be talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This is the reportedly final installment of director James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy saga, where, still reeling from the loss of Gamora, Peter Quill must rally his team to defend the universe and protect one of their own. If the mission is not completely successful, it could possibly lead to the end of the Guardians as we know them. Now, as the film proves, you're better off in a team than alone. That's why I've asked Keith Isles, who is very kindly standing in for Liz this week, to join in the show. Keith is the presenter and creator of the excellent Home Media Minefield channel on YouTube, which covers Blu-ray, 4K, cinema releases, unboxings, and more. You can subscribe to his channel in the link in the description. So, without further ado, let's get Keith on. Hello, how are you?
How you doing, Paul? Good to see you.
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm a bit under the weather today. I got a bit of a cold, so sorry to out there to everyone listening, or having to look at my face in general, because I'm not up to my usual beautiful standard. I've come down with the sickness, so yeah, but other than that, everything's good. I'm still kind of in the warm afterglow of seeing Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Oh, I do want to say thank you to Joel Meadows, by the way, from Tripwire, who kind of gave me his spare ticket for the multimedia press screening that you were at, Keith.
Yes.
So that was a nice surprise.
I couldn't get a spare ticket, unfortunately. I got a ticket for me, which I was massively grateful for. That was via BAFTA, but I was trying to get a spare ticket. Yeah, it wasn't meant to be. It was a very busy screening. So
it was a very packed screening, and a very good one. And I think they really kind of pulled out all the stops in terms of. Like they had a band there, they had cosplayers. I knew some of the cosplayers actually. The people I knew from my days at Orbital and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I do just want to say again, thank you to Joel for kind of arranging for me to be able to go there. I was really grateful for that. And I think he quite enjoyed the film. I know I did. I know you did. But we want to talk about why and the sort of things and emotions that this film brought up. Now you've seen the other two Guardians of the Galaxy movies, Keith, I presume.
Yes, yeah. I've seen, a lot of the MCU, especially the movies. Even if I'm not up to date with all the TV shows, right. I'm pretty much. I say pretty much up to date with the movies. I've not seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania yet. I have to be honest. I've not seen that, but otherwise, pretty much up to date with it all, and had indeed seen and enjoyed to an extent the first couple of Guardian films. So, yeah.
Enjoyed to an extent. That's interesting.
Well,
that's an interesting caveat.
Yeah, no. I mean, I guess my thing with this is I was pleasantly surprised, because I'm not gonna. Like, I went in thinking that I wasn't going to particularly like it, and ended up moved and entertained way beyond what I expected from this third Guardians of the Galaxy film. So yeah, I was very happy. And yeah, I thought it was really good. I know there's a lot of criticism out there about this one, but I don't sort of share that. I think the film is great.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, look, let's talk about what the film's really about. First of all, I think that there's always been a sense of family running through the Guardians movies, and in fact, kind of through the whole MCU. That is an ongoing theme that they like to kind of labor on and include.
Mhm.
And it's there in a ton of the movies, and it's been especially prevalent in the sort of movies that ended phase 4, I guess, phase 3.
Yeah.
And then into phase 4 and now 5. It's just I mean, it is kind of one of those themes that are all genre filmmakers, I think, these days try to include. Community, family, that sort of thing. And in a way,
like Fast and Furious.
yeah, exactly. And in a way, no, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, they bang on about that left, right, and center. In a way, it's interesting how some of these movies have moved away from what would be a component of them normally, which is traditional romance.
Mm-hmm.
Like there always had to be a love story. Remember, like in any of the kind of films that we grew up with and would see, there always had to be a love story. And now that's kind of shifted, and the focus has widened, and now it's got to be family. That's the key. And I do wonder if, in a way, that the Fast and Furious movies are kind of responsible for that. Even though I'm not really a big fan of the Fast and Furious movies, I have to say. I wonder if, in a way, that has kind of influenced that creative decision.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know what I've got. There were things about this that were refreshing for me with the Marvel films since Endgame, basically, since the end of the Infinity Saga or Phase 3 or whatever you want to call it. I've been a little bit more tuned out of the whole thing since then, to be honest. I really enjoyed Spider-Man No Way Home, as you know, because we did a stream on that. But a lot of the other stuff, both the movies and the shows on streaming, I've been a little bit sort of disappointed with. I got as far as Moon Knight, which I actually covered on my channel. You know, all the streaming shows up to that point, from sort of WandaVision to Moon Knight, and then I couldn't really get into Ms. Marvel, and I kind of didn't really want to see She-Hulk. And film wise, I mean, you know, I found like the Eternals a big letdown. Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and Thor Love and Thunder, you know, not great. And even Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which I really enjoyed the first Black Panther, but that one, I don't know whether it was because I saw it the same week or I'd seen it after I'd seen Avatar The Way of Water, which obviously they both feature a lot of blue people in water. And I kind of, Avatar was so well done that I kind of I got pretty bored through Black Panther. So, and I've not seen Ant-Man yet. So basically I kind of went into this knowing it was a 2.5 hour movie, and just a little bit sort of, I had just apathy, really. I sat there before it started, you know, just preparing to watch it, but not expecting to be as engaged and as moved and as entertained and satisfied as I ended up being. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, which I'm sure we'll dig into. But I wanted to sort of caveat where I'm sort of at with Marvel, at the point that this movie's come along, if you like.
I mean, I want to kind of address some of the stuff like the Marvel fatigue, because the headlines are kind of saying at the moment, given that the box office take of this film has been so high, the opening weekend, which is actually kind of an opening 5 or 6 days, because it opened on a Wednesday. Being that that's been so large, that they don't feel that the general kind of consensus is that comic book movie fatigue is not in evidence. I disagree with that. I think comic book movie fatigue is very much a thing right now. But I'm not sure that it will last. I'm not sure that fatigue will last. I think I think it'll ebb and flow, and it'll largely depend on whether or not the movies are any good. You can kind of see, as much as I enjoyed Shazam 2.
I've not. I confess I've not seen that either.
Yeah, sure. Kind of and again, that is kind of an interesting thing, because normally you would have been one of the people rushing to see that opening weekend. And the same with Ant-Man, but that there is that interesting effect that's kind of taken place recently. Even though I enjoyed Shazam, I can see why people wouldn't enjoy it, and why it perhaps wasn't the kind of huge thing that everyone expected. In terms of the Marvel stuff that you talked about, She-Hulk I found extremely entertaining, and I really enjoyed. Miss Marvel was terrific, and I think largely because it was aimed at a slightly younger audience, it had a good reason to be overwhelmingly positive, and that helped it in terms of its watchability. Moon Knight I thought was a really bold step and storytelling style. What else was out in this phase? Black Widow.
Oh yeah, which again, I actually really enjoyed Black Widow. It's just a shame it was 10 years too late. But
completely. I completely agree with you. And I suppose I think Liz and I talked about that when we did the show. Liz would have loved to have been on this, by the way, but unfortunately, she also has had like a really heavy.
She's off being Black Widow, right?
She was Black Widow for Free Comic Book Day.
It looked great, by the way. So well done, Liz.
But I think my plan is to kind of have Liz come on. We're going to do a show soon that's just about comics, but I also have said to her, if you want to come on and talk about Guardians and give your opinion, because I know people like to hear Liz's opinion.
For sure.
So she will be on, but she's just had a really busy work schedule, and she couldn't fit this in, unfortunately. So yeah, and in talking about those, Doctor Strange, I loved. No Way Home, I was kind of lukewarm on. However, having watched the extended version on Now TV a couple of months back, I've kind of revised my opinion a little. I enjoyed it. Doctor Strange, I really loved. I felt it was what happens when you get a filmmaker who actually knows how to move a film along in to do your film. You get a movie, and I really enjoyed that. But I think overall there is a fatigue. And I kind of get it. I think the Marvel are very aware of it, and they're talking about slowing down considerably now. And the general watchword has been quality over quantity.
For sure.
I guess they have to watch that though, because they've got the TV shows out there, and they kind of have to fit in. And I think part of the problem is having everything fit into this wider scope does sometimes backfire on you.
I mean that was going to be one of my points actually that you've kind of got to already is Like the Infinity Saga, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they made cinematic history there with what they were able to pull off. For the most part, being of a decent quality across the films. Obviously, this is before they had streaming as well, but that was a feat, and I don't think anybody can ever take that away from what they've done. But your point there is one of the reasons I enjoyed Guardians Volume 3 so much, and there are a number of things, but one of them was the fact that this story wasn't hampered by trying to set up stuff for other shows and movies, which is something that's kind of, I know they've always done it, it's always been a little thing, but because the MCU has got so big now, I mean, it's not just a cinematic universe, it's a cinematic and streaming universe. It's an MCSU right now. It's got so big that I think a lot of the shows and films are kind of hampered by setting up things to pay off in other films and other shows. I mean, I know, again, we won't go too into it, but I did, even though I didn't watch She-Hulk, I know that even goes meta to the point where the MCU is aware of you and stupid nonsense like that, which I hate, all that sort of thing. But
I'm not opposed to that.
Okay,
I loved She-Hulk, but I would say watch it and see how it's done, and then.
To be fair, I haven't watched it, so
please continue with your point, Keith.
But the thing I liked with Guardians Volume 3 here was the fact that it tied up the loose ends from not just the other Guardians films, but of course from the Avengers films, because they played a big part in that as well, and obviously Gamora's loss and all of this sort of thing. So I had to deal with that. Obviously, it also dealt with more backstories for like Rocket, for example. But it wasn't, I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't trying to set up something coming in a future show or movie. And I think that did it good. It gave James Gunn the breathing space to conclude this story and tell this story with these characters in an amusing, entertaining, and moving way, but without all the baggage of everything else. That's how I felt. I don't know whether you felt the same, but I thought that this film really benefited from that. Whereas I think some of the other films have been somewhat hampered by trying to tie in to either what's happened or what's going to happen in future movies.
Yeah, completely. This very much feels like a film on its own. And as you say, it does benefit from that. I think there was an interesting kind of tone to this film that you kind of get straight away. Right from the get-go, where the other films have kind of started with quite lively tunes from the 70s and 80s, here we get like a really nice acoustic version of Radiohead's Creep, which is probably one of the most dour hits ever written. But it's true. Like, I mean, I remember, being a little proto-emo prick listening to that song over and over, but it's a miserablest song. It's not it's not a happy song. It's not a positive song. And it's interesting having Rocket kind of singing along to that at the beginning. Because the song and the film are about being outsiders, but they're also about coming to terms with who and what you are, and the expectations of what you want to be versus the reality of what you are. And I think all the characters come to that point within the film, and I've got to say, it's a real feat of the screenwriting to actually bring all that stuff together in a decent thematic and visual way, as well as, you know, just via the dialogue.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It managed to pull that off, but still in a way of being true to those characters and still having the thing that everybody loved about the first couple of movies, with the sort of you know, the quips and the banter and the needle drops, and you know, all of those things that make a Guardians of the Galaxy movie kind of unique, I guess, from the other movies in the MCU, but at the same time, you know, being true to those characters, but also bringing that sort of emotional weight. And of course, what's really important is, you know, the Guardians of the Galaxy played a huge part in the Infinity Saga. You know, because well, first of all, they introduced the whole sort of space side of the MCU into the fold, but also, you know, the whole Thanos Gamora and thing was massive as well. And what I really loved, and one of the great decisions they made in this film, I think, was, you know, we've got the alternate Gamora, and they made her own character, not just a facsimile of the previous Gamora. And I also love the fact that I was worried that they were going to kind of get Gamora and Star-Lord, you know, back together. You know, and I'm so glad they didn't go there, because I think that would have really cheapened the emotional heart of what they did. They kept that absolutely true and realistic to the differences in those alternate Gamoras. Yeah. And they stuck the landing with that, and I was really happy. And they did that without anybody dying again or any of that stuff. They kind of did it in I thought, a satisfying way for all the characters.
I mean, and you're completely correct, because they don't, like, the thing is with that alternate Gamora, when you think about the previous Gamora, she was either a daughter of Thanos, or working for Thanos, or with the Guardians. And this Gamora has the opportunity to choose her own identity and to become who she wants to be. She's completely free of that. And that extends to the other characters. I mean, you know, Peter kind of comes to the conclusion finally that he's a human being and has to go home. And interestingly enough,
to grow up.
Yeah.
He has to grow up. Yes.
Yeah, completely. And interestingly enough, the whole film is calling him home, because you know, we have this planet, this sort of counter Earth, and I just feel like that's constantly kind of saying to him, no, you need to go home. Like, you've got to go home, and you've got to be with your family. Drax has to, you know, obviously he can't be with his family because his family are dead thanks to Thanos. But he gets the opportunity to build a new one in this. Nebula, of course, becomes, rather than a vessel for everyone else's ideals and interests, becomes her own person and decides that actually she's going to lead the, you know, lead nowhere. But also, I find that's a kind of overhang from her time with the Avengers and time on Earth during Endgame.
Yes.
Because where would she have got that idea? Yeah. Where would that notion have come from otherwise? And then, I mean, you have Mantis, who kind of, again, needs to go off and discover herself, apart from Ego and apart from Peter, who's now a sibling, which I think you might have missed because you didn't see the Christmas special.
Yes, I admit, yeah, I did. There were one or two moments. I soon got into it, but at the beginning of the film, to start with, I'd forgotten, because I hadn't revisited any of it, and I hadn't watched the Christmas special. So when Warlock turns up, Porter's character,
Yeah.
turns up, I was start with thinking, who the hell is this guy? What's this about? And then obviously it twigged. Oh, okay, this was set up at the end of the previous film. Yes, you know, the previous Guardians film, that is. So yeah, I didn't pick up on a few of the things there through. And you're right, I did miss the Christmas special.
So that was kind of the big stinger scene from the end of Guardians 2, as you pointed out. Adam Warlock, who we'll get to as well. And of course, we've got Rocket, who's the most critical kind of point to this film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I mean, I think I said when I gushed on, I think, my own cast or other people's streams or whatever about Endgame when it came out, which is, you know, frightening to think. What was that, 6 years ago now or whatever? Yeah. But when it came out, I absolutely loved it, and I said about how moved I was, and I said, you know, I can't believe that I'm invested. You know, I'm there watching the screen with this, you know, this giant green man and a raccoon, and I'm totally invested in these characters and stuff, and this sums it all up. I mean, the Rocket backstory was so heartfelt and so moving and so earned for the character. You know, it was a tonal change from what the rest of Guardians is, because let's be honest, Guardians is for the most part humorous and irreverent and all of that sort of thing. Yeah. So this was a little bit of a tonal switch, but it worked completely. And I love that part. I've heard people criticize that should have been its own film. But I feel that it kind of worked in the context of this one, and I loved it.
Yeah. I think with the Rocket stuff, that there was apparently a phone call between Kevin Feige and James Gunn, one of their many calls together, and James Gunn pointed out to Kevin Feige, he said, do you know how absurd it is that you've spent hundreds of millions of dollars to create a trilogy of movies that hang on a talking raccoon? Like, that's what we've got to. And I think it's true. And I think one of the things the film brings up is it doesn't really matter how you look or what you are, it's how you act and be that really counts towards your kind of character.
Yeah.
And I also find us going back to all the way back to an early scene of Rockets in Guardians 1, where, as he points out, there ain't no thing like me but me. But of course, there are things like him. And in this film, he gets his affinity and connection with those things, with those other creatures, and learns to embrace both sides of himself. And I thought that was beautiful. And genuinely, as you said, you find yourself welling up and filled with emotion over these kind of bizarre creatures, which is not an unusual thing in cinema or any kind of visual entertainment. I don't think it's exclusive to visual entertainment, but it certainly is a much stronger kind of. I mean, I'll spend endless hours watching animal videos on Instagram Reels or YouTube or Shorts and stuff like that. So I'll always be cooing and gurgling over those because I love, give me a soft fluffy animal, I'm happy. I am a big softie. Like I will admit to being that those things will be my kind of Achilles heel of any kind of toughness I love. And I think the film knows that about its audience and pushes that button.
Yeah. Now, what also I liked here was, I mean, generally when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I have more of a affinity to, not an infinity, an affinity to like Winter Soldier, Civil War, the Avengers films, and all of that sort of thing are more my kind of thing than something like Guardians. However, I think that the way these Guardians films have been made, the way they've been written, and the way that these characters have been portrayed and interact with one another is so well done. Like I love the humor. I love the whole bit where Peter's trying to talk to Gamora, and you got that awkward, you're on the open channel, and then they have all the arguments about which buttons relate to which suits and all of that sort of thing. That stuff is written and performed so well. I loved all that. And again, in terms of the imagination of this, because this is where they were able to, a lot of the MCU up until the Guardians had been sort of set on Earth at different time periods on Earth, and sort of related to science or experiments or things of that nature, and then they sort of made it out of this world kind of thing with this, and they've used that to actually, that level of imagination to show us something different, because I thought visually, from a production design point of view and everything, the first heist that they do on that space station where they're in their colored spacesuits and stuff, I just thought that was so refreshing to see, because it looked so different to everything we've normally seen. It really did feel like an alien environment in the literal term, and I loved it. So there were a lot of things about this I enjoyed.
I think the first Guardians movie for me was the place where the MCU started to become visually interesting. And you see a lot of people. One of the things I always see online, especially on Twitter, is a lot of the kind of MCU stands saying, "Oh, you can't. How can you talk about the MCU having just the same style of photography and all this?" And they'll show you lots of shots, lots of individual, screen grabs of shots from the movie, and they're like, "Look at it, it's called," all this kind of nonsense, and which is fine. If you like it, you like it. But what I think those people are getting confused with there is lighting and color versus composition of shot versus movement of camera, which is the thing that really counts with films. It's like the camera movement is highly important, and how you get in and out of a scene, how you move in the space that you're in. I mean, this from the films you've directed and been in. It is important, and I think films today are really beginning to degrade in terms of their kind of visual literacy for me, and I think this film kind of was really well done in that sense, and it really had, as you say, an imagination. The colors were gorgeous, the kind of bizarre, icky nature of it, of the organic kind of places that they were in, was at once kind of very gross, but very interesting and very appealing. And I think that was quite a bold step to take in terms of the look. But for me, Guardians is always been a playground for that stuff.
They let James Gunn, be a director and bring his visual style and thematic tones and all of that to the MCU. I do think to an extent there is a bit of a house style to some of the films and shows. But then again, it does have to sort of fit into that cinematic universe. And I think the fact that a lot of what happens in the Guardians film takes place away from Earth and away from, what's established, does allow for a bit more creativity there in the like you said, the camera movement, the compositions, the editing, the transitions, all of above, really. And I did think that the set pieces in this one were particularly well done, and looked really good, and was well put together. And I did particularly like that heist, in the fact it was so different, but it was also so entertaining with it. The banter and everything was there.
And also, effectively, is it that heist or the first heist that's entirely pointless? They don't. They don't need to do it.
Yeah.
Which I think is
again that's the misfits that they are, isn't it? It's
And I think you brought it up earlier when you were saying about the scene with the open comlink channel, which is there is an underscore of important things happening and important emotion that needs to be reached and things that need to be said and things that need to be done. That is always undercut by something entirely pointless and entirely distracting and entirely nonsensical and something that's entirely emotionally led or impulsive. And in a lot of ways, it does show what children they all are.
Yeah.
Really.
Yes.
I mean, Gamora's the grown up. I think Nebula's very much the grown up, even though her emotional development is somewhat retarded by the fact of this kind of constant competition she's put into with Gamora. But the rest of them aren't. They aren't grown ups. They are children. They are kind of impulsive. And I think that gets played really well. And I really liked it. So yeah, I mean, just visually interesting, very exciting, a lot of fun. We've got to talk about the High Evolutionary. So
it's great.
Can you pronounce his name for me? So it's Chuck Woody. I've got to look it up now.
I'm going to make a fool of myself, probably. Hold on.
Chuck Woody Awuji, I think his name is, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I believe he's a Nigerian actor, but I think his natural accent, at least most of the time, is English, which I was quite surprised at because I've only heard him in Peacemaker,
right?
Where he was excellent, but he does that entirely in an American accent. So I think he's quite chameleon like in his performances and things. And he was great.
He was fantastic. Yes.
Yeah.
Really a really good antagonist for this film, I think. And for this story, this conclusion, if you like.
And I think to their credit for hiring someone, again, he's classically trained. So I believe he was an associate at the RSC. So he was kind of doing Shakespeare when James Gunn found him, and his performance here is it's a very haughty performance, and very he's very disgruntled and emotionally removed, but also massively egotistical. And again, I always associate kind of massive egos with, youthfulness and impetuousness and childishness. And,
yeah, I mean, there's a level of hubris here with this character, isn't there? For sure. And I think the fact that he was trying to, the reveal being that he's trying to keep of his appearance, which we assume is trying to keep a youthful appearance, is actually trying to hide what Rocket had done to him. I thought, which I liked. I thought that all again thematically lined up with everything that had been set up in the film. So
Completely. And do you know what? I actually missed that point, that it was Rocket that kind of made him the way he was.
Yeah.
And well done for spotting that, because I actually kind of missed that little through line and thread. And his appearance is quite horrible, but he suffers because he can't do what the characters are doing, which is learning to accept who they are and what they look like.
Exactly.
Now,
yeah.
I found a lot. Speaking of, sorry, the look of the characters. One thing I found interesting about this is we kind of went backwards in terms of visual sophistication, in that it was just a bunch of guys running around in animal makeup and suits for a lot of it. When they're kind of making the giant creatures, when they're enlarging them and evolving
Oh, I see.
them.
Yes. In terms of
and which I was really surprised at. There didn't appear to be much CGI there apart from the transformation itself.
Yeah.
But the end result was a bunch of people in like furry suits.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some respects that was quite refreshing.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's if the story that's being told, is a good one, and that sort of thing doesn't matter too much. And I think, but this way, as I said, I went in, it did turn me around, because I went in ambivalent, to be honest, with the whole thing, and I was just like, whatever, let's see what happens here. And I was pulled in very early on. As I said, I had a moment of confusion about the Adam Warlock thing, and then it twigged, and I was like, oh, right, okay. And that was because I hadn't done my homework. I hadn't done a, recap or anything on what had come before. I just went straight into it. And, it was great. And one of the things, the other things I was pleased about, obviously there's a lot of things I'm pleased about with this film, but one of the other things is there was speculation going in as to whether any of these characters were going to survive, whether some of them were going to die. And they even did the fake out with a couple of them, because you get quite early on, you think, oh my God, they killed Drax, and obviously the whole Rocket thing is the through line of the whole story. And then obviously with Peter at the end and all of this stuff, I'm actually really pleased that they didn't kill anyone, and they kept it that everybody got to have their ending and move on, and I guess could be used again. Although I like the sense of finality to this as well. I think it's something that the MCU kind of needs, because I know Endgame gave us it for a lot of things as well, but that there is this whole thing about, you just think, oh God, is this ever? It's just getting bigger. Is it ever going to end? Kind of thing. Well, and I like the way they sort of handled that for these guys.
Well, I think what's interesting about the Guardians characters is that if Thor dies tomorrow, there'll be another Thor, because someone else will take over. Someone else will be worthy. The Captain America mantle has already been passed on. The Iron Man mantle is kind of getting passed on to a couple of different characters, Spider-Man and in Wakanda Forever, Riri Williams, Ironheart. So they're all mantles and identities that can be passed on. But there won't necessarily be another Star-Lord. There won't be another Drax. There won't be another Rocket. There won't be another...
Unique. Yes, they're so unique.
They are unique.
Yes.
And I think that's part of what the film is about embracing your uniqueness.
Totally. I would say you summed it up right there in terms of the thematics of this. Is absolutely that. More so even than the family thing, I think, in some respects. I think the accepting who you are is a key element here.
And also accepting that the existence of your family and the unit you're in is finite. like there is only so much time that you're going to have with people you love, and eventually that's going to be gone. And I think that was beautifully done.
Well, with Groot saying "I love you guys" instead of "I agree," I did. Yeah, again, emotional. I went into this. I didn't expect to be emotionally moved by a CG tree character. Do you know what I mean?
Do you know how they did that? Is that CG? Because it's a very much a very hench Groot in this movie.
Yeah.
Groot 2.0, we're at now, where he's sort of in his late teenage years, I guess. So also going in, just a warning for the parents out there: you get Marvel's first ever F-bomb in this. It's the first use of the F word.
I can't even remember where it is. I can't even remember where they use it.
It's in the moment where they're trying to get into the car.
Oh yes, okay.
Which was hilarious.
It went right. To be honest, it went right past me. I didn't even think of the fact that that's Marvel.
But yeah, it's the first time they've ever had the F word in Marvel, and in fact, there's a few others in there they drop. So, pushing that rating to the limit.
The other thing I like that it did as well is, and it did it in a way that made sense to the story, because obviously we know where Peter comes from and what era he grew up in, and obviously he's always doing the mixtapes and all of this sort of thing, which is great. But I love the fact that he said what the audience thought about the High Revolutionary, and he's like, "You RoboCop meets Skeletor wannabe," and all this sort of thing. And I thought, oh, that's brilliant, because that was done in a way that sort of made sense, rather than a way that was kind of mentioning that, and you sort of think, oh, that feels a bit forced. In this sense, I did like that. I really like that reference.
Yeah, absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. And also, I think it's interesting watching as the characters get older and learn more about themselves and accept who they are. The playlist moves along, because we've moved from the 70s soundtrack of the first one to the 80s tunes of the second. Obviously, there's some 60s stuff in there thrown in as well, I believe. And then you get now to the 90s with this one. And at the end, we see Rocket, move the playlist down on his iPod to the 2000s.
Yeah.
So it was,
and how great that Rocket is the leader now. That is again where he was supposed to end up. I felt the other thing I will say, and I won't obviously linger on this, but the other thing I found refreshing about this, so there were a lot of things. I felt that it was a good conclusion to this story and these characters, without obviously killing them off, but at the same time not doing a cheap swap out with Gamora. I thought that was great. Obviously we've said about the tying up the loose ends from the Infinity Saga as well, with Gamora's death and Nebula's treatment and all of that sort of stuff played in there. Everybody, Mantis, Drax, Groot, Rocket, they all got their moment. But the other thing I liked generally about this story, and especially in this phase of Marvel as well, is I also felt that I was being entertained and told a story, but I wasn't being preached to. I really felt like there was nothing in this story that was remotely preachy about society. And I found that refreshing. To be honest. We were with the characters that we went to see, and we joined. We had their story and their conclusions, and then they all went their separate ways, or not. Some of them stayed together, some went their separate ways, just like real life. I just came out of it feeling sort of satisfied, and I sort of thought this this is what I loved about the earlier phases of Marvel, is when you get that kind of feeling coming out. And I think that's been a little bit, for me anyway, a little bit missing.
Okay, that's interesting.
Since.
Although, I mean, as you've said it, I've just thought that I think that it does say something about society, but as you say, without preaching. And I think what it says for me is, and this has only just occurred to me, so I could be completely wrong. I haven't really thought this through, but what it says to me is you have to accept responsibility for the worlds you create. And so obviously none of us are gods. None of us are out there breeding human beings or animals for to improve their intelligence and create a perfect society. The way they I'm busy this weekend. The way the high evolutionary is. But you are creating the world by contributing to it. And, you are creating your environment by what you put into it. And I think what it says is you need to act a bit more responsibly and be aware of what you're doing and what you're putting out into the world.
Oh, for sure. And also you need to accept everybody for who they are, which, I mean, these are all like of things that everybody should live by anyway, as far as I'm concerned. But at the same time, they're not. I don't know. I just felt this didn't have that sort of preachy element about it, which I've heard criticisms about some other Marvel properties over the past year or two, and I felt that this didn't have it, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that I was just able to be entertained and taken on a journey, and and not sort of sit in the cinema feeling bad about myself at any point,
Yeah, completely.
Yeah,
I think that is a key thing with a lot of stuff now is that, society, things should be moving on and aren't, but we kind of have to aim a bit higher. But yeah, I mean, I think, Keith, that for me is it. I don't have anything else to add to this. I think it was a great movie. One of the better Marvel movies, certainly quite possibly the best Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
I think for me personally, yes. I mean, when you asked me to do this, I tried not to. When I do streams now, even when I host them to a certain extent, is I'm trying not to sort of overthink about what I'm going to talk about, because I find that when I do that, I end up frustrated because I miss things and I don't get.
Sure.
I just trying to go with the flow a bit like I did with this movie, I guess. Just go with it. And I think I've sort of covered what for me was great about this. And I would go as far to say, from my point of view, it was my favorite of the Guardians trilogy, if you want to call it that, even though of course I know it also has to link into the Avengers and other stuff. But I felt quite pleasantly satisfied with this.
Oh, good. I'm really glad. And I'm glad we actually got to bump into each other in the queue for the movie.
Who knew? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, hello. Yeah. It was cool, and I'm grateful that I get to see these things. We obviously got to see it. I know that this film is released multi-format. I know you can. It's available in 3D. It's available in all sorts of different things. We got to see it on IMAX, and it looked great. I mean, it was good to see it on the big screen.
There's a lot of
been invited.
There's been a lot made of, and this is probably more your end, the technical end of stuff, a lot made of, over 600 different versions of the film. And what that means is they've gone for a wide variety of formats. You pick the format that's best for you. And obviously living in England, you're going to be limited anyway as to what formats are available. But definitely worth watching, definitely worth watching in IMAX, definitely worth watching in 2D. It is out now. It's out Wednesday the 3rd. So it's had its first sort of near week on release. Do go and see it as soon as you can.
Sure.
And while you're waiting for the movie to start, as you're sitting through the interminable number of adverts, I do hope that you'll be listening to this podcast. Keith,
Yes.
We can find your stuff on Home Media Minefield, which is a great
That's
YouTube
correct.
channel where, as I said, you cover 4K, Blu-ray, unboxings. You do so much stuff on there. I really love seeing the kind of stuff you're putting out. And of course, you do live shows where you get guests on and you talk about movies and TV. And in fact, I guested on a show just a few days ago with Keith about The Mandalorian, which is a retrospective on the sort of 3 seasons that have gone. It's great to see Simon Aiken there and Graham as well. Lovely to see those guys, and lovely to have that chance to kind of get to talk to you as always. And Keith, we've got some stuff coming up. We hopefully will have some shows coming up over the summer where Keith and I are going to be talking about a couple of movie series in particular. Keep an eye out for those. I won't say too much just yet, just in case the dreaded life schedules get in our way and we can't do it. But those are planned for the next few weeks, and they'll be starting soon. So keep an eye out for that. Those will be on the Real Crush, which is the more sort of non-comic book based film show that I do from time to time. Other than that, Keith, is there anything you want to plug or talk about before we go?
No, I mean, you've done it for me, really. Yeah, Home Media Minefield. As I said, but there's probably do more live shows and things of that nature these days than actual home media reviews, to be honest. So check that out. And also, if you want to see some of my more creative work, I do have another YouTube channel which is British Isles. That's EYLES, as in my last name. And I've got some short films that I made on there. You know, always trying to get an audience for that sort of thing as well. So
we'll put those links in the description for you to tune into. Keith does great stuff, and I'm always pleased to see more of his videos sort of arriving on YouTube. I've just got to find the time to watch them. That's the thing with all this. How do we find?
There is that.
So thank you for watching. Do remember 15% off until midnight, Monday the 8th today, in the web shop with the code BATBANK15. So 15% off anything £8 and over in the web shop. So you can get some really great comics and comic sets there. There's some Marvel, there's DC, a ton of Batman. There are loads of indie comics. There's some great stuff in there. Hit the workshop. That all supports me being able to do this, make more of these shows, review more comics, all that kind of stuff. And you can also support on a longer term basis on the Patreon from just £2 a month. So less than the price of a cup of coffee. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for listening to our audience on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being able to talk to you guys again. And we'll see you soon. We're going to go. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.